Taken from the book Stories and Tales of Therianor. Alchemists 2. It was not difficult to get lost between the streets of the city of the Alchemist and Kragner, which would come to be something like the least affluent sector of the great mining city. Belader had come out to visit it and thus take advantage of relieving a little of the tensions caused by Pyriel and his rather strange welcome talk. The city was huge, too big to cover even in a week. Hundreds of carts loaded with ore passed through towers arranged in an orderly fashion between the houses and the guardhouses. Hanging tracks with carts that did not stop coming and going, just like the huge number of merchants and people from all over Therianor who came to trade and at the same time to seek the latest in technology. The Alchemists Center was located on one of the many streets carved directly into the mountain, surrounded by viewpoints that gave the full view of Kragner Bay from where a huge number of ships slowly entered and left, traveling south towards Marionor or even beyond, towards Libryan, although always keeping the coast in view, lest they lose their way and end up falling off the edge of the world. Belader toured the viewpoints several times, contemplating the sea and the city in its greatest splendor. It was an impressive work of engineering. There was no doubt that the alchemists, who ruled the city since its foundation, had done a wonderful job. He would have liked to go to the lower part, but without his escort he was not sure if he would be able to return in time for dinner, and he certainly could not miss dinner, since it was precisely the alchemists who financed his research and basically fed him. At what point had it sold for so little? Well, it wasn't that little, but there was no doubt that it had been sold for several hundred decals, gold weight or silver weight. Well, it depended on where one was in Therianor. Belader was well acquainted with the history of the alchemists at Therianor, their commendable work in developing many of the engineering works that were used in multiple cities, but he also had some notion of the darker parts of their history. One of them, and perhaps the more disconcerting, was the fact that in the annals of Therianor's history only 2 Grand Masters were recorded, the current one, Mercer the Grand Master, and his own mentor the Grand Master Albano. Belader was in these musings when he felt his arm touched. Belader turned around. A tall man with long hair and black beard, as black as a wolf's mouth, or more, and blue eyes, out of this world blue, had never seen such deep eyes. Belader was troubled for a few seconds. "Excuse me, I'm new to the city and I'm looking for the rooms of the Grand Master Alchemist. Could you tell me how to get there?" Belader lowered his gaze and could only just realize that the man was not alone. Beside him there was a gray-haired girl with a threatening look and a man several years older than her with a beard and black hair painted with red stripes, with some scant gray hair. "I'm sorry to tell you, good man, that just like you, I am also a visitor to this huge city, and for the same reason I cannot be of help to you." The historian immediately remembered that everyone in the alchemist's compound could help him. It was impossible that they did not know where was his Grand Master. It was even very possible that Pyriel decided to accompany him himself, but apparently it is his lucky day, because I am a historian who works for Pyriel, the master alchemist of the city. He can probably be of help in your search." The tall man with a handsome face smiled appreciatively. "How wonderful! I appreciate your goodwill very much." He looked away at the girl on his right, and immediately the 2 companions bowed to Belader as a sign of gratitude. Belader restlessly slid to the side. "Follow me please, we're not very far. Oh, by the way, my name is Belader, I am a historian and I come from the city of Libryan." The man ran his hand through his well-groomed beard as if pondering his answer. "My name is Helegor. I'm not sure how you would define my work, but I think the best thing to do would be to say that I'm a mix between a magician, scientist, and alchemist." Belader stopped his walk and stared into his blue eyes. "I advise you not to say that you are a magician so easily, less in broad daylight and in such crowded places, at least if you intend to stay alive for a long time. I see a lot has happened in my withdrawal from the world." Belader looked at the man with some surprise. Without a doubt he was a strange guy, even more strange if he needed an escort, but truth be told, in his many trips he had learned to ignore the peculiarities of people and focus on their stories, that it was his work, the merely superficial was of no importance to him, although there were subjects like Pyriel himself, who caused him some contradictions in this principle. Belater led them back down the wide street. The view was wonderful, the landscape invited them to stay and seek new horizons, but they had to move on. "Excuse me for asking, but are your companions quiet enough?" Helegor again ran his hand over his well-groomed black beard. "In fact, it is necessary that this is how my dear savior be. My previous assistants turned out to be too talkative and ended up falling into the net of, so to speak, the competition, and you imagine that in my area the competition is quite great." "It was, you mean?" "Of course it was. Well, I'm not very aware of the current circumstances, but in my day it was. I don't think I have problems at the moment. What is used now is alchemy, and to tell the truth, outside the guild there are no alchemists, although are none, is what is rumored." "What do you mean?" Helegor asked, gazing at the historian. "Well, I don't know if I should say it, but it is evident that the Alchemists Guild, of the Alchemy School, has extended an enormous network of contacts through the Therianor to bring all those who practice alchemy to this city, monopolizing its prodigies, selling them at an enormous price to whoever is willing to take their wonders to their cities, as they did in Hyperion when they raised the, until now, impassable white wall." Helegor raised his eyebrows, meditating on what he had heard for a few seconds. "It makes a lot of sense, it is a very clever move, but I understand that this city has a huge mine. Why would they want more resources, with what they obtained from the exploitation of minerals should not be enough?" Belater sighed. The truth is that he felt a bit traitor saying all these things, but on the other hand it was those kinds of things that he was most passionate about, the gossip, the speculations and everything that was behind the public events. "Good friend mine," Helegor smiled at the historian as accepting the fact of being called a friend. "I must say that Grand Master Mercer has not been seen in quite some time. Pyriel has replaced him in almost everything along with the Guild of Alchemists, who control the city and Kragner, of course, always keeping the distances and differences. The evil tongues say that Mercer has been working for a few years in the most complete secret on something that could change the history of the Therianor forever. The most cautious believe that he simply died and they have not found someone suitable to succeed him, but the truth is that he did not. It would be strange for Mercer to take an apprentice as they did with him when he sees the end near his life, and that has not happened, so I think that the first assumption may be more real than the second." Helegor seemed gloomy for a few seconds, as if searching his memory for some distant memory. "Well, Mercer was always a strange guy, too much for my liking and quite ambitious too, although always focused on his work. I doubt that his machinations escape from what has to do with alchemy, so you can rest assured." Belater turned to the wizard in surprise. "I thought he was just a visitor like me, but he seems to know the Grand Master quite well." "We are not friends, but I know him, or rather, I knew him for a long time." The sigh that came from his lips was almost as deep as the feeling of abandonment that was left after him, as if an unfathomable wave of time had him. "Would have carried more than I myself would have wished. I suppose you will be surprised to learn that I am here, but I am here for purely intellectual matters." Belater looked out at the ocean again. "I thought alchemists didn't deal with wizards." "Well, it usually is, but Mercer knows very well that alchemy is only a part of what we know as arcana, so to speak, the outermost part, while arcana, true magic, would be the essence of things. That they deny it is another story." Belater had almost no knowledge of magic theory, so he preferred to keep a respectful silence and just nod. "It's not like the magicians respect alchemists very much, Most of the time we treat them as mere mechanics. I suppose that's fate, although apparently they have managed to reach much higher than we did. If you think they can walk the streets freely, well, in that sense they have done quite well. Belater led them the same way he had started. His companions were quite strange, the girl and the older guy with the red-spotted graying hair, but especially the imposing figure of Helegor. As they approached the Alchemists' Center, where they would surely meet Pyriel, he said, "I think we arrived early for dinner, although I don't think Pyriel would mind a mid-afternoon snack. That Pyriel must be someone important, right?" Belater stopped before answering. He knew well that talking about who was hiring him was almost treason, but for some reason he felt prompted to answer, especially when he looked at Helegor's face and his deep and enigmatic blue eyes ran through him completely. "Look dear, the truth is that he is a very important man, something like the second in command of this city. It could be said that Mercer's right hand, although to the surprise of many he could never be his successor. As you will only know, the successor may know the secrets of the master, and that has raised certain quarrels between them. But as long as Pyriel can exercise his power freely and Mercer remains locked in his studies, the balance remains. But let me give you some advice." Belater approached with a suspicious glance towards Helegor. "Lately Pyriel seems too interested in the history of humanity with the gods, especially in what has some inkling of reality and not simply legend and superstition. I suspect that they will have agreed again somehow and have returned to work together, and nothing good can come of that. But my friend, please understand that Pyriel, however harmless he may seem, is a dangerous man, just like Mercer." "I see, you are quite well aware of the details of the city." Belater raised his chest, as if that had been a compliment. For him in effect, it was. "It is part of my job to know the other side of history. After all, a historian must reconstruct, and for that you always have to know a little more of the personality of those who build the story." They continued to advance, and when Belater was about to knock on the door, his handsome and slim companion put a firm hand on his shoulder, surprising him and made him hesitate for a second. "For your enormous help, my lively friend, I will give you some advice too." Belater just managed to look at him surprised. "Do not think that this is a coincidence. We met because something greater than destiny wanted it, the gods perhaps?" Helegor's eyes seemed to shine brightly. "It could be perfectly, that no one has forgotten anyone, neither they you, nor you them. We have always been present for each other, for better or for worse, although the times they close, and you will soon see that it is true, that everything has been a game." Belater was completely stunned. He hadn't understood anything at all. The ramblings of a magician? He thought, yes, it couldn't be otherwise. After all, he was a strange man. He knocked on the door of the Alchemy Center and they entered the place together, welcomed by several novice alchemists who guided them to the same room where Belater had been before with Pyriel. This time everything was ready for dinner, but the food had not yet arrived. Same as Pyriel. He tried for a few seconds to distract himself by going through the books on the shelves on the walls, but Helegor's attentive gaze did not let him do it in peace. He turned several times to see if he was observing him, and truth be told, he was never observing him, but he felt his cold gaze on her back, as if a dagger was driving into her. Finally he tried to break the ice. "I suppose he will come any minute." "Oh, of course it will come, of that there is no doubt, everything will come in due time." The image of Helegor sitting on the couch with his escorts standing behind him was quite imposing. Both guys looked even more dangerous than they looked on the street, so Belater began to believe that Pyriel's words about a visitor were they referred to Helegor, whom he himself had brought to the place. "Don't look at me that way, my esteemed historian. You can imagine that intuition is as essential for us magicians as it is for you in reconstructing the history of Therianor, albeit clearly on an essential level." The coffee table, a huge fruit plate with gold trim on the edges. "Look at this plate, you know it is empty. An alchemist might think it is too, but for a magician to obtain the prodigy of creating. He moved his fingers in a strange way and a beautiful green apple appeared in his hand. Belater was stunned. From where apparently there is nothing, something is in essence as elemental as breathing. Helegor put the apple on the plate before continuing, and yet we both know that magic has its limits, just as knowledge has its limits. In this case the limit is the man, the creator, not the creation, not the creature. If the creator is imperfect he will do imperfect things. That is a fact so true, like here we are both. Please taste the apple. Belater approached and took the apple with a certain resentment, but when he chewed it the surprise ended up completely invading him. The apple looked like one, it crunched like one when biting it, but it did not have the taste of one. In fact it had no flavor. Tasteless, he muttered, swallowing a piece of the tasteless apple. You have just verified one of the limitations of magic. As an expert magician I have created an apple from the essence of the arcana, and it is in appearance like an apple, both in appearance and texture. It even smells like one, but at the moment of testing its essence we find that something is missing. It is not an error in calculations, it is not an error in magic, it is an error in our way of conceiving the object. Just as alchemists have their taboos, magicians have ours. That apple did not grow on a tree, it has not drunk water, nor has it touched the essence of life, so it has no flavor. Although structurally it is an apple, in essence it only seems so, but it is not, because it does not fulfill its real objective. It is a construction of my intellect, not of nature, and in that process it has lost all its essence. This limitation is there so that we and the alchemists do not reach the highest, the gods. Belater sat down. At some point in the conversation Helegor had caught him and he could no longer stop listening to him. It was as if he had fallen prey to his words. The gods veiled the secrets of life to men. The divine spark is restricted to the gods. That is why we cannot create life, neither animal, nor human, nor vegetable, at least not one that lasts long enough. If you hadn't eaten that apple in a short time, it would have disintegrated, lost its stability, and disappeared of its own accord. Belater raised his head. He was really disturbed, but even more surprised. Why are you telling all these things to me? Helegor looked up at the ceiling of the beautiful hall and sighed. My humble friend, you are here to instruct me about everything that has happened in my absence and to take us to those points in history where we forget something or miss something. I am sure Pyriel and I, even Mercer, can get good things out of all of this. And do not worry, I will not say anything to them about your personal opinions. After all I think the same as you. But for the moment we work together. The magician smiled at him, showing all his teeth. He simply was stunned. It was too much to assimilate in a few minutes. At what moment had he accepted this madness? Belater put his hands to his face in a gesture of repentance and let himself be carried away. He was already there and apparently there was no way to retract.
If you like our work, do not forget to like it and subscribe to receive notifications of our next stories. If you want to support our editorial project, you can follow us on Patreon, where you will find our project in more details, or support directly through Flow in the description links.